Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah? Okay. So, I'm going to take all of you back with me, and we're going to go back 18 years down my memory lane. And I'm a young mother reading, a lot of you may have done this, reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to my toddler. Actually, I had to read it every day. But, unfortunately, my child, instead of sitting and listening, he's running around, he's jumping on sofas, he's completely ignoring me, okay? And then suddenly, there's a crash, and I go running, like expecting tears, right? And instead, I'm greeted with the demand, why did you stop reading? He didn't care about his scraped knees. He wanted to know what happened next. And that was my first experience with the power of reading to a young child. Children who are read to from a young age, they love stories. They love books. But why is it so important that they love books and they love reading? What are some of the benefits we see of being an avid reader? First and foremost, as Amira mentioned, the first word revealed in the Quran was read. It is a command of our Rabb. Secondly, academics. I have been teaching for over 2 decades. And in these 20 plus years, I have seen the same thing over and over again. In fact, any teacher can attest to this. Children who show high levels of vocabulary, children who have a really good grasp of grammar, students who show a deeper understanding of human nature and the world around them, students who are able to fluently read and comprehend all kinds of nonfiction from science to economics. All of these students, what they have in common is that they are prolific readers. They are being read to at home and they are reading constantly on their own. Third, aggression. Studies have actually shown that reading calms children down. It lowers levels of aggression, and this is particularly true for boys. Fourth, focus. Reading teaches children how to have high levels of focus. In this era of distractibility and phones and screens and video games, you are sitting, you are focused, you are reading. 5, understanding the world around you. Reading and good books, like some of those on our site, they explain the world to children at a level they can understand. A 3rd grader who has read The Toothpaste Millionaire, which is a 3rd grade book, but a 3rd grader who has read The Toothpaste Millionaire understands production costs, profits, losses, capital investment, and she can follow her father's conversation about the latest Silicon Valley startup. It will make sense to her. A 4th grader who has read The Pushcart War, which is a 4th grade book, but that 4th grader will understand how propaganda and media, instead of the truth, shapes public opinion, something we're all seeing. So if reading has so many benefits, right, how do we make sure that our kids are also prolific readers? Now, in the late 1990s, book publishers everywhere saw a sharp increase in book sales. Books were flying off the shelves, and, well, if you're as old as me, you'll remember that stores like Borders and Barnes and Nobles were really popular, right? So social scientists started studying this phenomenon. What was making so many people so attached to books? And they narrowed it down to 3 significant factors. The first factor that they gave credit to was when Oprah Winfrey started a book club on her very popular morning show. Like, really, you guys. She would passionately discuss books she enjoyed on her show, and overnight, those books would become bestsellers. So there was an interview with this author, Jacqueline Mitchell, and she said that nobody, not even her own publisher, realized what Oprah featuring her book would do. Her book, within days, shot to the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for 13 weeks. The second factor that these scientists pinpointed was that the whole world was introduced to a young man named Harry Potter. So Harry Potter blew all the theories out of the water. J.K. Rowling introduced us to him in 1997. And at that time, most people were saying, like, no child is going to read a 500+ page book. Well, Harry Potter proved them all wrong. Kids were willing to stand in line for hours to buy a 500+ page book. The third factor that these scientists pinpointed was that the internet became very popular. And all of a sudden, articles and books were instantly accessible in the most remote areas. So what do these studies tell us about our children and how do we encourage them to read, right? The first thing it tells us is that if people are enthusiastic about books, the way Oprah was, it's contagious. I'll give you an example, okay? This book, okay? A teacher introduced this book to my 6th grader 9 years ago. Like, Wafa, this is an amazing book, you have to read it. My daughter was like, really? Okay. She took it home, she read it, right? And then she read this entire series. Okay. And then she told her entire class, like, oh my gosh, there's this amazing series. Most of them read the whole series. And then they went on to 7th grade, but they told the incoming 6th graders, oh wow, you guys, there's this amazing series you have to read. And for 9 years in that school, every year the 7th graders tell the 6th graders, you have to read this amazing series. And they all read it, 9 years. In fact, 2 months ago, a whole bunch of them went all the way to San Francisco for a book signing by this author. The second thing we learned from all these studies is that if you have good characters and good stories like Harry Potter, kids will read. In fact, they will sneak off and stay up till 2 in the morning reading when they should be sleeping for school. The third thing we learned from these studies is that if books are accessible, people will read. Now, there's a really inexpensive book reading kit that I learned about from Hina Khan Mukhtar. You might have heard of her, Masha, she's a great speaker. And she calls it the 3 Bs. And I highly recommend that each of you have the 3 Bs in your home. The first B is books. And I'm a big fan of libraries. I advocate used books, but every child should own pristine copies of some of their favorite books that they can write their name in and that they have for themselves. The second B, she says, is bookshelf or book basket. Every child should either have a bookshelf in their room or a book basket by their bed where they keep their books. So they're right there. Okay? The third B is a book lamp or a bed lamp. So every child, when they go to bed at night, when they've said their du'as and they've put on their PJs and brushed their teeth and prayed Isha and they're getting into bed, they should use their book lamp to read something. Just 10 minutes every night. But over time, they will come to associate that comfort, the coziness of their beds with reading. What else can we do besides this? Okay, we can create an environment where our children actually want to read. And research shows that the primary factor for children wanting to read is that if reading is being role modeled in their homes. Okay? And this is actually the sunnah of our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He never asked us to do something he was not doing himself. And that means the adults in the home have to be reading as well. And I am not talking about reading on your phones, okay? Every adult should have a stack of books on their coffee table or by their bedside that they're going through. Your children should see you. Put away that laptop, put away that phone, and pick up a book to read. And share your favorite books with them. Tell them why you love it. It really is contagious. I know a family, anytime they're going on vacation, this is how they start their vacation prep and their vacation shopping. They buy books from everyone, from the dad to the toddler. Everyone gets a book, like what are we going to be reading on the beach in Hawaii? We need the books. They buy those books and those books get packed first. And there's another family I know, any place they go, these are their souvenirs. They find a local bookstore and they get a book from it. Like, this is the book we got from Indonesia, and that's the one we picked up in Medina across the Haram. And it works when your children see you modeling reading and love of books. They are watching and they will copy. So last, but the most important one, reading aloud to your child. Now, how many of you were read to as a child? Do you remember how that felt? It's, mashallah. So, Amira demonstrated the power of reading to kids, right? And I'm going to share some tips about how to read to your child. Okay. Now, the first thing I want to mention is reading aloud. Multiple studies show that reading aloud is the single most important factor in improving academic performance of your child. It is literally more important and more effective than teacher attention, more effective than homework, and more effective than one-on-one tutoring. Okay? So, how do we read aloud?
Fatima. I have to give her
Now,
ticket.
here's a book I recommend. This is the Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease. If you don't have it, it's an amazing book.
She's not there.
But one question I've heard from parents is, when should I start reading aloud to my child? Okay. And Jim Trelease says you should start when you start talking to your child, which is generally 3 to 6 months when we start cooing to them, right? And who's hungry? So read to them. And do you stop reading when they're old enough to read for themselves, like when they're 8 years or 9 years old? Not at all. I still read to my teens. And if I'm busy, they read to me. As kids get older, read alouds are a great way to bond with your child, to have conversations about difficult topics, have discussions about things you want to discuss in a very natural, organic way. The second question parents ask is, well, what do I read? Right? And not every book makes for a great read aloud. And that's why Mindful Muslim Reader will tag books that make for good read alouds. And it's a good place to start building, a home library. Now keep in mind, you want to read above your child's intellectual level. Because a child cannot read above their intellectual level, but they can listen above their intellectual level. Kids are very capable of understanding sophisticated vocabulary, of learning complex grammar if it's being read to them. However, just be mindful that if you're reading above their emotional maturity, for heavy topics, you may need to explain some things. Always start by introducing the book, from the author to any prizes the book may have won. Introducing your child to the idea that the quality of the writing matters. Right? Develop a routine. Do this regularly. Never, ever, ever use read alouds as a bribe or as a punishment. Trust me, I've been tempted. Don't do it. Just make this a regular part of your routine and do it every day, even if a little bit. Yeah? And be patient. I really counsel you to be patient with kids when you start reading aloud, because it takes them a little bit of time to learn the skill of focusing, right, and listening. Amira also gave an excellent demonstration of how to be animated and using different voices and putting emotion into your reading. Okay, so look, just don't be shy, it's fine. Enjoy yourself, okay? Over the years, I've done everything from choo-choo whistles and growling bears, and I've made a complete fool of myself. And the kids love it, okay? My son's absolute favorite teacher was the one who did Tom Sawyer with all the accents and all the noises. Right? Most of all, is number 4, right? I would say that the most important thing you can do when you read aloud to your child, you want to tell every child, from a preschooler to a high schooler, you want to tell them no matter what kind of book they're reading, picture book, science fiction, memoir, whatever the book, right? Every single book has a message that the author is putting out there. Just like every song and every movie has a message. And sometimes these messages are obvious, sometimes they're a lot more subtle. So use read aloud to train your children to see these underlying messages. And tell them that it is your job to find the message in whatever you're reading. And is it a message you accept? Is it a message you agree with? Is it a message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are also giving you? Is it a message your parents want you to embody? And if not, what do? Right? Teach them that not every book is a book worth reading. Not every message is a message you want to absorb. Okay? You want to raise readers, but ultimately we want to raise thinkers. Now, after all that effort, how do you know if you're succeeding? Right? So we have an acid test. If your child can answer these 3 questions, you've got a reader. Question number 1. What was the last book you read? Question number 2. Which book are you reading right now? Question number 3. What book do you plan to read next? If your child can answer all 3 questions, then inshallah, you have a lifelong reader. Thank you. I'd like to invite Amira for a Q&A.